Tolani, is that you?
I'm home, Mummy.
Your eyes, they're empty. What happened to you?
Nothing. I'm just happy to see you.
They made us kneel for hours, locked us in dark rooms. The darkness was so scary. I was so alone and scared. Why did they do this to us?
Adenike Martin stood in her living room in Lekki, Lagos, staring at the girl who claimed to be her daughter. The girl looked exactly like Tolani. Same height, same face, same tribal marks on her cheeks, but everything else was wrong. Tolani had left for St. Catherine's Girls' Boarding School in September 2015 as a vibrant, rebellious 14-year-old who argued about everything, loved hip-hop music, and dreamed of becoming a fashion designer. She came back in December 2018, 3 years later, as someone else entirely. The new Tolani sat perfectly still, with her hands folded in her lap. She spoke in a soft, measured voice. She quoted Bible verses. She smiled constantly, but her eyes were empty. When Adenike asked what happened at school, Tolani said, "St. Catherine saved me, Mummy. I was lost before, now I'm found." Adenike had sent her daughter to one of Lagos's most prestigious boarding schools. What she got back was a stranger wearing her daughter's face. Subscribe right now because this story goes deeper and darker than you can imagine. A Lagos woman sent her rebellious teenage daughter to an elite Christian boarding school. 3 years later, the girl who returned was completely different. Obedient, submissive, religious to the point of creepy, spoke like a robot. No personality, no dreams, just Bible verses and empty smiles. The mother investigated and discovered something horrifying. St. Catherine's wasn't just a school, it was a cult. They broke the girls down systematically: brainwashing, isolation, punishment, psychological torture, until they became perfect, obedient, mindless shells. 50 girls went in rebellious, 50 came out identical. This is about Nigerian boarding school abuse, religious extremism, mind control, a mother's fight to get her real daughter back. Hit that bell. This is Adenike's story. In early 2015, Adenike Martins was at her wit's end. Her daughter, Tolani, was 14 years old and completely out of control. The girl had failed JSS 3 exams twice. She sneaked out at night to attend parties. She talked back to teachers. She wore makeup to school despite the rules. She dated boys. She listened to Wizkid and Davido at maximum volume and told her mother that school was useless and she was going to be a fashion designer anyway. Adenike was a single mother. Tolani's father, Benga, had died in a car accident when Tolani was 8. For 6 years, Adenike had raised her daughter alone while working as an accountant in a bank in Victoria Island. She tried everything: discipline, therapy, changing schools. Nothing worked. Tolani grew more rebellious each year.
One Sunday at church, Redeemed Christian Church of God in Lekki, Adenike sat with her women's fellowship group. They were discussing difficult children. Sister Bimpe, a wealthy businesswoman, said she had sent her own rebellious daughter to St. Catherine's Girls' Boarding School in Ibadan 3 years ago. "That school transformed my Funke completely," Sister Bimpe said with conviction. "She was wild like your Tolani. Now she's at university studying medicine. Focused, respectful, obedient. St. Catherine's is a miracle." The other women nodded in agreement. Several had daughters there. They all spoke about the transformation, how the school used strict Christian values to shape wayward girls into proper young women, how the principal, Mrs. Okoronkwo, was a former missionary who understood discipline, how parents saw results within the first year. Adenike was desperate. She enrolled Tolani in September 2015. The school fees were expensive, 850,000 naira per term, but she would manage anything to save her daughter from ruining her future. On the day she dropped Tolani off at the school compound in Ibadan, a sprawling estate surrounded by high walls and gates, Tolani cried and begged not to be left there. "Mommy, please, I'll change, I promise. Don't leave me in this place." The girl's face was streaked with tears as she clung to her mother's arm. Adenike hardened her heart. "This is for your own good, Tolani. You'll thank me later." She drove away, watching in the rearview mirror as school matrons in white uniforms pulled her sobbing daughter toward the dormitory buildings. Adenike told herself she was doing the right thing. Tough love, that's what Tolani needed. For the first 3 months, Adenike heard nothing. St. Catherine's had a strict no-contact policy. No phone calls, no visits, no letters. Parents were told this was necessary for the girls to adjust and focus on their transformation without outside distractions. The first parental visit was scheduled for December, the end of first term. When December finally arrived, Adenike drove to Ibadan filled with anticipation. She wondered if Tolani had calmed down, made friends, started taking school seriously. The visiting day was held in the school hall. Parents sat on one side, daughters sat on the other, all wearing identical white blouses, navy skirts, and white headscarves that covered their hair completely. The girls sat with perfect posture, hands folded, faces blank. Adenike scanned the room looking for Tolani's distinctive way of slouching. Her eye rose. She saw nothing. All 50 girls looked exactly the same. Then one stood and walked toward her with measured steps. "Good afternoon, Mommy." The voice was soft and monotone. Adenike stared. It was Tolani but different. The girl had lost weight. Her eyes looked tired. When she spoke, it was like listening to a recording. They sat together for the allowed 30 minutes. Adenike tried to ask questions. "How is school? Are you making friends? What are your classes like?" Tolani's answers were brief and rehearsed. "School is good, Mommy. I'm learning discipline and godliness. My classes are fine. I'm grateful to be here." "But Tolani, really, tell me, are you happy?" The smile never wavered. "Happiness is fleeting, Mommy. What matters is obedience to God and parents." That wasn't 14-year-old Tolani would say. But Adenike told herself it was progress. The school was working. The rebelliousness was being tamed. She saw the other parents around her having similar robotic conversations with their daughters. Sister Bimpe's daughter Funke sat nearby, speaking in the same soft, measured tone. All the girls sounded identical, talked about godliness and obedience and gratitude. None showed any personality or emotion. When the 30 minutes ended, a bell rang. All 50 girls stood up simultaneously, said goodbye, God bless you, to their parents in unison, and filed out in a single line. Adenike watched Tolani leave without looking back. On the drive back to Lagos, Adenike felt unsettled but pushed the feeling aside. This was what she wanted, wasn't it? An obedient, focused daughter. The strange behavior was probably just adjustment. By next year, Tolani would be more natural. The second year visiting day in December 2016 was identical to the first. Same white uniforms, same blank faces, same monotone voices. Tolani was thinner, her eyes were more hollow. When she spoke, it was like listening to a recording. Adenike tried to break through. "Tolani, I brought you your favorite chin-chin from the market. Remember how you used to love it?" The girl looked at the bag of snacks as if seeing something foreign. "Thank you, Mommy, but we don't eat worldly snacks at St. Catherine's. We have simple, godly meals. Indulgence is sinful." "Tolani, it's just chin-chin." "I'm not hungry, Mommy, but I'm grateful for your thoughtfulness." The smile remained fixed.
Adenike looked around the hall. Other parents were having similar strange interactions. Some mothers were crying quietly. One father stood and demanded to see the principal, insisting his daughter was not well. School staff in white uniforms surrounded him immediately and escorted him out, while his daughter sat unmoved, staring straight ahead. Adenike left troubled. She called Sister Bimpe that evening. "Did you notice anything strange about the girls? They all seem so lifeless." Sister Bimpe laughed it off. "That's discipline, Adenike. That's what we paid for. They are not lifeless, they are transformed. Wait until Tolani finishes, she'll be perfect." But something felt wrong. That night,
Adenike couldn't sleep. She kept seeing Tolani's empty eyes. By the third year, Adenike had grown increasingly anxious. She tried to withdraw Tolani from the school, but St. Catherine's had a strict policy. Students who enrolled must complete the full 3-year program. Early withdrawal forfeited all fees and could result in the student receiving no certificate. Adenike couldn't afford to lose 850,000 naira times 9 terms. She convinced herself to wait just 1 more year. In December 2018, Tolani completed the program. Adenike drove to Ibadan for the graduation ceremony filled with mixed emotions, relief that it was over, fear about what she would find. The ceremony was held in the school chapel. All 50 graduating girls wore in perfect rows, wearing white dresses, white headscarves, and white gloves. They moved in unison like synchronized swimmers. When Principal Mrs. Okonkwo spoke about their transformation from wayward girls to godly young women, the girls nodded simultaneously. When called to receive certificates, each girl walked with identical measured steps, curtsied identically, spoke the same rehearsed gratitude speech, and returned to her seat. Tolani was number 37. Her speech was word for word identical to the previous 36 girls. After the ceremony, Adenike finally brought Tolani home to Lagos. In the car ride, she tried to reach her daughter. "Tolani, you are free now. You can relax. Tell me how you really feel." Tolani sat with perfect posture, hands folded, staring straight ahead. "I feel blessed, Mommy. St. Catherine saved my soul." "But what about fashion design? You used to dream about it constantly." "Those were worldly dreams, Mommy. Now I understand my purpose is to serve God, honor my parents, and prepare for godly marriage." Adenike's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Marriage, Tolani. You are 17. You should be thinking about university." "Mrs. Okonkwo says university is where girls lose their way. Better to marry young to a godly man and focus on homemaking." "Tolani, that's not what I want for you." The girl turned and smiled her empty smile. "What you want doesn't matter, Mommy. What matters is God's will." At home in Lekki, Tolani's behavior became increasingly disturbing. She woke up every morning at 4:30 a.m. to pray for exactly 2 hours. She only wore white or beige conservative dresses that covered her completely. She threw away all her old clothes, makeup, and music. She spent hours reading the Bible and Christian self-help books about submission and obedience. When Adenike's sons visited, Tolani served them silently, eyes downcast, never joining conversations. When they left, several pulled Adenike aside. "What happened to Tolani? She's like a ghost. That school broke her spirit completely. She's not your daughter anymore." Adenike knew they were right. The vibrant, argumentative girl was gone. This replacement was polite, obedient, and completely hollow. She never laughed, never showed anger or joy or any genuine emotion, just that constant empty smile and soft monotone voice. Adenike tried everything to reach the real Tolani. She played her daughter's favorite Wizkid songs, Tolani covered her ears, and said secular music invites demons. She showed Tolani her old-fashioned sketches from when she was 14. She said they represented her sinful past. She tried to hug her daughter. Tolani stood rigid and unresponsive. One night, Adenike woke at 3 a.m. hearing voices. She found Tolani in the living room, kneeling on the floor, swaying slightly, reciting what sounded like mantras. "I am nothing. God is everything. I submit. I obey. I am nothing. God is everything." Over and over in a whisper for hours. Adenike took her daughter to a therapist. The therapist, Dr. Fashola, spoke to Tolani privately, then called Adenike in looking deeply concerned. "Mrs. Martins, your daughter shows signs of severe psychological conditioning, possibly trauma-based mind control. This wasn't education, this was systematic breaking down of identity and rebuilding into something else."
What do I do? Intensive therapy, deprogramming, but it will take time. The damage is profound. Adenike began investigating St. Catherine's. She contacted other parents of graduates. Most refused to talk. Those who did spoke in whispers about regretting sending their daughters, but feeling unable to speak out because the school was so prestigious and connected to powerful churches. One mother, Mrs. Adebayo, agreed to meet Adenike secretly at a restaurant in Ikeja. Her daughter Chioma had graduated the year before Tolani. My Chioma was just like your Tolani, rebellious, creative, full of life. When she came back, she was a shell. Within 6 months of returning home, she married a man from our church she barely knew because he was godly. She's 19 now, with a baby, living like a housewife, no dreams, no personality, just obedience. What did they do to them at that school? Mrs. Adebayo leaned in close. I heard from a former staff member who quit. The school has methods. They isolate the girls completely. No outside contact. They use sleep deprivation, keeping them up for prayer vigils all night. Constant fasting. They punish any individual thought or behavior, make them kneel on gravel for hours, lock them in dark rooms, call it spiritual warfare. The girls break down psychologically and they rebuild them into obedient copies of each other. Adenike felt sick. That's abuse. Why hasn't anyone reported this? This school is protected. Principal Mrs. Okonkwo has connections to major churches, politicians, and wealthy families. Parents who speak out are threatened with lawsuits for defamation. And honestly, most parents wanted this. They wanted their rebellious daughters fixed. They just didn't realize what the cost would be. Adenike went home and confronted Tolani directly. What did they do to you at St. Catherine's? Tell me the truth. The girl's smile never wavered. They saved me, Mommy. Tolani, please, I know something terrible happened. You can tell me. The girl's eyes flickered for just a second. Behind the empty smile, something that might have been the real Tolani appeared briefly, looking terrified. Then it vanished. The smile returned. I am nothing. God is everything. I submit. I obey. Adenike hired Dr. Fashola for intensive therapy sessions. For months, they worked on the programming. Slowly, painfully, the real Tolani began emerging in fragments. During one session, she broke down crying. They told us we were sinful, evil, that our parents sent us there because we were demons. They made us pray for hours on our knees until we couldn't stand. If we fell asleep during prayer, they punished us. They locked us in dark rooms for days with only water and bread. They told us if we didn't submit completely, we'd burn in hell and our parents would die because of our wickedness. The words poured out between sobs. They made us repeat mantras thousands of times. I am nothing. God is everything. I submit. I obey. Until we couldn't think our own thoughts anymore. Until we became what they wanted. I tried to resist at first. But after weeks of punishment, isolation, sleep deprivation, I couldn't anymore. I just wanted it to stop. So I became what they wanted. We all did. Adenike held her daughter as she cried. I'm so sorry, Tolani. I didn't know. I thought I was helping you. You sent me there to be fixed because I was rebellious. But I wasn't broken, Mommy. I was just 14. The therapy continued. Slowly, over months, the real Tolani began recovering fragments of her old self. She started drawing again, listening to music quietly, speaking more naturally. The empty smile appeared less often, but the damage was profound. She suffered from PTSD, anxiety, and depression. The confident, vibrant girl Adenike remembered was gone forever, but perhaps a new version could emerge. In 2021, a scandal broke. A former student of St. Catherine's, one who had been expelled early for refusing to comply, came forward with detailed testimony about the abuse. She had documented evidence, including videos secretly recorded on a smuggled phone, showing girls being punished, mantras being recited, sleep deprivation tactics. The media picked up the story. More former students came forward. Parents who were silent began speaking out. The Lagos State Ministry of Education launched an investigation. St. Catherine's was shut down in June 2021. Principal Mrs. Okonkwo and several staff members were arrested on charges of child abuse, false imprisonment, and psychological torture. The school's records showed a pattern of systematic breaking down of students' personalities and rebuilding them into mindless, submissive shells. Adenike testified. So did Tolani, though the experience was traumatic. 50 families were affected. 50 girls had been psychologically damaged. Some, like Tolani, were slowly recovering through therapy. Others seemed permanently changed, unable to reclaim their original personalities. The case made national news. Churches that endorsed the school issued apologies. Parents who had praised the transformation faced their guilt. The conversation opened about what Nigerian parents were willing to do in the name of discipline and how that could enable abuse. Today, in 2024, Tolani is 23 years old. She's studying fashion design at a local college, reclaiming the dream that was stolen from her. She still struggles with PTSD and has setbacks, but she's fighting to rebuild herself on her own terms. Adenike has learned a painful lesson about the cost of trying to control and fix her daughter instead of understanding and supporting her. She attends support groups for parents whose children survived institutional abuse. Mother and daughter are rebuilding their relationship, though the trust broken in 2015 may never fully return. Tolani has forgiven her mother intellectually, but carries emotional scars. Of the 50 St. Catherine's survivors, most are in therapy. Some have recovered significant parts of themselves. Others remain shells, unable to break free from the conditioning. A few committed suicide, unable to cope with what was done to them. The case made a precedent in Nigeria for prosecuting institutional child abuse disguised as Christian discipline. But many similar schools still operate protected by religious authority and parents desperate to control rebellious children. Adenike often thinks about September 2015, the day she left Tolani crying at those gates. If she could go back, she would drive away with her daughter and accept her exactly as she was, rebellious, creative, alive. Because the obedient shell that came back 3 years later was 1,000 times worse than any teenage rebellion could ever be. This is Adenike and Tolani's story. A mother sent her rebellious daughter to an elite Christian boarding school. 3 years later, a different person came back, obedient, empty, brainwashed. The school used psychological torture, sleep deprivation, isolation, and religious manipulation to break down the girls and rebuild them into mindless, submissive shells. 50 families affected. Investigation exposed the abuse. School shut down. Staff arrested. Tolani recovering through therapy, reclaiming herself, studying fashion design. But the damage is permanent. This is about Nigerian boarding school abuse, religious extremism enabling torture, parents choosing control over understanding, children paying the price. Subscribe. Comment if you experienced boarding school trauma. Share if you believe no religion justifies breaking children.